Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Isabel Picornell, and we're going to talk about the up-and-coming Alderney Literary Festival. Good to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me on again, Tony.
Absolute pleasure. What festival number is this?
This is the 8th.
Good heavens.
Yeah, unfortunately, we missed 2 because of COVID.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been the 10th. But
Yeah. But that's an incredible achievement, isn't it?
Who would have thought back in 2015 when we had our first one?
Yeah, yeah, and it's
We'd still be going today.
And ever popular. Now, can you give us the dates for this year? It's in March.
It is. It's the 22nd, Friday, the 22nd of March to Sunday, the 24th, 22nd to the 24th of March. And as usual, in the Island Hall.
The Island Hall, not the Methodist Hall.
No. The Literary Festival is always in the Island Hall because we have the 2.5 days of talks.
Yeah, okay, understood. Tickets are available now. How do you get them?
Tickets are largely sold out.
Really?
Yeah, they are. They're on sale at the visitor center, the few that are left. There's literally under a handful for the talks that are still available, but most of them have sold out.
Well, that's really good, isn't it?
It is excellent, and it's still a month to go.
Yeah.
Tomorrow will be a month to go to the festival, and yeah.
So I suppose there's a possibility of returns if people, for one reason or another, can't make it. So, it's possibly worth going into the visitor information place now and again just to see if anything has come back, I guess. Yes,
that's true. So first stop for people on island would be the visitor center. Other is you can go online. If we do get returns, we put them online.
Yeah.
There's always the possibility of returns because people from off island who come tend to buy rover tickets. But they won't go to every single talk.
Yeah.
But they'll just buy a ticket for every talk and then return the ones that they don't want to go to. And it's always worth it turning up at the festival on the day because there are always no shows. And if there are empty seats.
And there are, of course, the books there to purchase and everything else. So that works out quite well. Yeah. Right. Let's get
a special discounted Lit Fest price as well.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's well worth going for them.
We do because we get 40% discounts from the publishers, and we pass that on to our festival goers.
A very noble cause, if I may say so. Let's take a look at the authors. And of course, the first one is Anthony Richards, chairman of the Alderney Literary Trust. He's been the chairman for ages, hasn't he?
Well, this is his 5th festival.
Yeah.
Yes. So originally they're chairman for 3 years, but then he got interrupted by COVID, and he's doing such a great job. And as secretary of the Historical Writers Association, he has unique access to a lot of these authors.
Are you bound to have to replace him, or can you just, keep him going indefinitely?
I think we're very lucky to have him. He does a great job. We would keep him going. But there is an obligation on him to trek all the way here every year.
Yeah.
And, it's whether he's prepared to continue with that obligation. At the moment, it works for both of us. So long may that go on.
That's good. Absolutely. Just a brief synopsis of what he's been up to.
Well, he has actually moved from historical fiction writing. That was his original. He wrote historical fiction set in Roman times. And he's now moved into present-day thrillers. So the really gritty type. So he has 2 of his books out, Nemesis and Target Zero. So if you're into drug smuggling and gang warfare and all
I
that
do a
sort of
lot of
stuff.
that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something to do in retirement, isn't it?
So that's what he's writing these days.
Yeah, and obviously being pretty successful at it. Does he hope to get some television or film movies out of it, or what's the score there? Do we know?
I guess authors always hope to.
Yeah.
I have nothing on that. That's one to ask him when he comes over.
Okay. Well, I'll leave you to do that because I'm not going to be there. And report back next year, please, if you wouldn't mind. The next one that we've got on the list is J Parris, Stephanie Merritt, and it's a pseudonym of the #1 Sunday Times best-selling author.
That's right. So Stephanie Merritt, she's a journalist. She still writes for newspapers, on television and radio, but she writes two sets of novels. One is current day, what would you call them? Yeah, current day thrillers, which she writes under her normal name, her real name, Stephanie Merritt. And then she writes historical thrillers under the name of J Parris. And she is coming to Alderney to talk about her latest book, Alchemy, which is in the series of, she writes a series set in Tudor England on the real life heretic philosopher, Giordano Bruno. So Giordano Bruno was originally a Dominican monk who was thrown out of the church for his heretical ideas that together with Copernicus, that the earth wasn't at the center of the universe. And he survived by the patrimony of the royal houses of Europe. France, England, Germany. And so her series follows his life, which is very, very interesting. Of course, the fiction part turns him into an investigator of murders, which is very interesting because you have all the traditions of Tudor England coming to light. So she is the most famous best-selling author we have to head up our lineup. And in addition to her talk at the Lit Fest, she is also doing one of the book clubs. So we have 4 of our authors doing book clubs across Friday and Saturday, and she will be doing a book club at the Blonde Hedgehog.
Right.
On when is that? On the Friday, 11:30.
So the book clubs basically are intimate little gatherings where you can, more or less sit next to the author and listen and ask.
Absolutely. It's free.
Yeah.
It's free. You have to pick up a ticket so we can control numbers and the tickets from the visitor center, and we provide teas and coffees.
Okay, that's good. Let's move on to author number 3, Gail Simmons. She's a walking writer. I was a bit intrigued with this description. Tell us.
Well, Gail is a travel writer.
Oh, right, okay.
She teaches travel writing at the University of Bath. And I have to say, she is doing a one-day course for us on travel writing on Alderney on the Saturday, the 14th of September. But she is coming to talk about her book, Between the Chalk and the Sea. And in it, she retraces the medieval pilgrimage route, which was the original pilgrimage route from Southampton to Canterbury. Because Southampton in the medieval period was the main port of England from the continent.
The Pilgrim's Way.
That's right, yes. Yeah. And today it doesn't exist in its entirety, so it's been incorporated into other walking routes. Yeah. But she talks about her walk on this route through 4 different seasons of the year. So it's partitioned to 4 seasons. And not only the history of the route, but what she sees in the present day as part of her walk. So that's where it is. She's a walking writer because she describes the route that of the pilgrimage walk.
Did she do B&Bs en route? Is that the way she does it, or
Yeah,
goes back to her
that's right.
base? Yeah. Okay.
No. She does B&Bs, even Premier Inns along the route.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fair
And
enough.
local pubs
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
local
Yeah.
pubs that you do find along the route. And as much as possible, if any of the original hostelries exist, which they largely don't, because they were largely the B&B facilities used to be hosted by the monasteries,
Hmm.
which I think one or two still offer that. So that's the accommodation along the route.
So she'll be walking along the A272, which goes from Winchester all the way through to, well, I don't know, Upfield and places like that. Past my old school. There you go. Right. Next one, Mr. Vaseem Khan. Now,
Yes,
he's quite interesting in terms of the fact that he was the first chap to actually non-white chair of the 70-year-old UK Crime Writers Association.
Association, that's right. And I'm sure you'll remember Abir Mukherjee from a few years ago. Vaz is and Abir are good friends, and Abir recommended Vaz, and he's very entertaining. Yep. So he writes 2 series of books set in India during the 1950s. But the series he is going to talk about with us about is the Malabar House series. Now, it's really interesting because, our idea of historical fiction requires that the fiction is based on real characters.
Yeah.
So you can't just have an entire fictional setting set in a historical context. The requirement is that these are real people. And his series of the Malabar House, of which the latest is, gosh, I can't remember the name of the latest book. It's that. Anyway, that's a brain dead. Anyway, the series is set on the life of the first female police inspector in India, in Bombay, in the late 1940s. And this lady was a Parsi. And so, if you remember that period, this is about just after the partition of India into the Hindu state and the Muslim state.
Yeah.
And here you have a Parsi who neither of them like. So
ideal person, totally neutral.
And she's female.
Yes.
So you have all the misogyny and the racism that comes with it. And it's a very interesting series, lighthearted series. It's very easy to read. And so it's very well set in the politics of the period. So this is where many of the English who used to live in India have now left. And you've got the residue of the ones who decide to stay behind. And so this particular book is based on a crime which involved, the suspect was a white person who was found guilty and was sentenced to be hanged, a real case.
Yeah.
And basically all the racism that accompanies, or you want the reverse racism that accompanies this scenario of an example being made of a white man, and then the Mumbai police being asked to reinvestigate the case. So a fascinating specific period in Bombay history.
To actually be elected as chair of the Crime Writers Association, which is 70 years old, is quite a prestigious thing to happen, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I met him at the end of last year in London, and he wants his role now to be more inclusive, to invite more minority authors, to write on more topics rather than just, white British history. And so you have this expansion to include, of course, the Indian subcontinent, but, any other minority authors writing in English in the UK.
Out of interest, do his books sell well in the subcontinent, in India?
I don't know. I don't know that. He
Be
lived
interesting
in
to find
India
out.
for about 20 years before coming back to the UK. And they sell very well in the UK. But, that's another question I'll have to ask him.
Okay. You can credit me with that one when you ask it.
I certainly will. I'm making a note of all these questions.
Let's move on to number 5. Priscilla Morris. She's got a PhD in creative writing from the University of East Anglia. And she also read at Spanish and social anthropology at Cambridge University. So obviously a lady that's got a pretty good brain there.
Yes, absolutely. And what I find, in compiling the biographies of these authors, the vast majority of them have gone to Cambridge or Oxford and have done writing courses.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that's a cause and effect but it's an interesting association. So Priscilla Morris is one of our debut authors. We traditionally have a debut author that we invite to the festival. In this case, we have 2 because we couldn't choose between the 2 of them. So Priscilla Morris' book is Black Butterflies, and it is based on her maternal grandparents' experience of the siege of Sarajevo.
Right.
So Priscilla's mother is Yugoslav.
Yeah.
And she was trapped, and her mother, so Priscilla's grandmother and grandfather, were trapped in Sarajevo during the siege. And what happened was the father, in order to get out, the Red Cross were evacuating, but they couldn't take a whole load of people at any one time. So they had to split them up into small groups. So her grandfather and his mother got out, but the grandmother got left behind, and she was in Sarajevo for the 2 years.
She survived it, though.
She did. She did survive. The Red Cross got her out after various failed attempts. Because of the fighting and the shelling, there were various attempts to remove these evacuees, and they couldn't, at the last minute, they had to abandon them. So she did get out, and they resettled in the UK, which is why, Priscilla is. So this is a really incredible debut piece of work. The writing is very good. It's been shortlisted for various prizes, Women's Prize for Fiction, the Ondaatje Prize 2023, and it is a stark read. It is not a romanticized story of the siege. It's very stark in its reading.
But I mean, it came straight from the horse's mouth almost, didn't it, with her?
Yeah. Yes.
Family connection.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's harrowing, and the psychological impact, on the people left behind. And when you think about what's going on in Ukraine and Gaza, the impact of the bombardment, the starvation, being surrounded by death, not knowing what will.
Yeah.
It's harrowing.
The big question on this one is that had Tito survived or lived a lot longer, it probably wouldn't have happened, would it?
That's a really good point.
Sometimes dictators control things.
Had a grip. He would have had a grip on the political situation.
Yeah, very much so.
All the what ifs of history.
Yes, absolutely. Right, number 6, Marko Gasic. Is that how you pronounce it?
Gasic.
Gasic.
He is Serbian, but born in the UK. He is the editor of the book Folly and Malice, which is a monster. I mean, it's about that thick. It's been acclaimed as a what is it? The ultimate book on the analysis of World War One, the origins of World War One. It has also received criticisms on some of its interpretation. And that's what we want the festival to be about. We want people to question, read critically the histories and the fictions that they read.
Yeah.
And this invitation, which was originally extended to the author John Zametica, who cannot come because he's in bad health and lives in Vienna.
Okay.
So Marko Gasic, as the editor, is instead attending. It will be very interesting. Marko is also taking part in one of the panel discussions on the difference between, or the conflict between, memory and history when it comes to historical writing. You have official narratives that are sanctioned by organizations and governments, and which are not always the truth.
Yeah, you say that about the Tudors, can't you?
Yeah,
Tudors
absolutely.
and propaganda and Richard III.
Absolutely, and even current histories.
Yeah.
So whatever the criticisms of this book, what it brings out is there is an alternative way of looking at this. And that is something we at the Alderney Literary Festival like to bring out.
Yeah. Full of actual variety, as we say. Now, Mellisa Fu, F-U?
Fu.
Okay. Yes,
Fu.
I'm sorry about my pronunciations.
It's all right. Mellisa is our other debut novel.
Yeah.
Novelist. This is, it's called Peach Blossom Spring. Now, I have to say, I did meet her last year in London, and the title did not appeal to me because to me it came across as some sort of romance.
Yeah.
But she said, it's not at all, read the book. So I did. And it is a wonderful book. It is the story of her great-grandparents and as a reflection of the history of modern China. And it starts with the Japanese invasion of China and her great-grandfather being mentioned throughout, but disappears. He's a soldier. And her great-grandmother, together with the rest of her family, have to flee, to walk across China, going north to escape the Japanese invasion. And then after the war, as you know, China is hit by civil war.
Yeah.
You have the nationalists and the communists. And the people who get caught in the middle are the ordinary folk who again have to flee to escape the fighting. And they end up, her grandmother and her great-grandmother and her grandfather, the son, end up in Taiwan. And it's the story of how, they learn to live with the situation there. Her grandfather then earns a scholarship to go to the United States, and he never comes back. So that is how Mellisa ends up. She was born in New Mexico. Her grandfather was, after graduating from the university, ended up as a scientist in one of the V2 scientific research, American research centers in New Mexico. And it's her, in spite of the fact that she is a second-generation American, the language is a lot of Chinese elements in the writing. And it's intertwined with Chinese history and tradition. And it's also not, they survive in the end, but it's very difficult. This is a story of how Chinese have to integrate into American society and end up rejecting their Chineseness,
Yeah.
if you want.
Yeah.
And then the families that follow having to deal with this fallout. So a very good book. I do recommend it.
Nominations, plenty of nominations, yes.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
translated into a dozen, a great number of languages: English, Dutch, German, Italian, Hungarian, Romanian, and Persian, and
Yeah.
now the very latest, Polish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So quite an achievement from that point of view. I have to say that I think if you move to another country like they did, it is really very, very necessary to integrate, to become part of that new country. And I think that's possibly where other places go wrong. But anyway, that's a personal opinion.
No, you are right, and this is what Melissa's grandfather does.
Yeah.
But what happens is he marries an American, and they have a daughter, and he stops her daughter from learning Chinese, and he does not talk about the past.
Yes.
And so you have this gap.
Yes.
And they're fully integrated, but at the sacrifice of half of their identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I like about the book is it leaves you to come to a decision about what's good and bad about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't preach.
Obviously, two sides to everything from that point of view. So, yeah, I see where you're coming from. Now, David Leffman, another British travel writer. Well, tell us more about him.
Well, I mean, the theme of the festival is journeys. And so, after all, so David Leffman is really interesting in that he is not normally a historian. He writes for guidebooks.
Yeah.
So the rough guides for the eyewitness guides on China. So if you've ever had either of those guides in China, you're looking at David's work. Now, early on in his career, he became fascinated with an individual called William Mesny. Mesny was born in Jersey, ran away to sea at the age of 16, and ended up as a general in the Chinese army, where he lived in China for most of his life. And he was a mercenary, I suppose, renting himself out to one warlord or the other. But I came across him because of a contact he made with me, because Mesny's family is actually from Alderney. Although he was born in Jersey, it's an Alderney family.
It's an Alderney name, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And actually, Louis Jean lives in William Mesny's house on Alderney.
Well, I trust Louis will give him a guided tour then when he comes.
Well, David sent me a photograph that Mesny's granddaughter had sent to her from Canada. So that part of the family is now in Canada. And he said, when I come over, I want to see this house. And I thought, oh my God, I know exactly
there
where
you
this
are.
house
Yeah.
is.
So, well, if Louis is watching this, he's being put on notice, isn't he?
Absolutely, yes. But it is like Gail Simmons. This is a walking tour. So it's a combination of David Leffman retraces William Mesny's travels throughout China, because one of Mesny's contribution was he was one of the guides for the original National Geographic survey and the original UK surveys of China on the Nepal border.
Right.
And so David Leffman traverses that, follows the route, what originally William Mesny wrote in his diaries and publications, and what is actually there now. So a fascinating look at the original history, the original route, and how it's changed in the hundred so years.
Yeah, very much so. Right, number 9, Marek Kohn.
Marek Kohn is my favorite of all this because of his book. Marek lives in Brighton. He's British born, but he has a number of non-fiction books under his name. He writes about evolution and language and linguistics, and the climate change. So that's what he's more famously known as. But this book, The Stories Old Towns Tell, is a look at some of the towns and cities that were flattened in the bombardments of World War II.
Yeah.
So towns in Europe, and how they were rebuilt and the politics behind the rebuilding. So what he says, the whole argument behind the book, and I will say that I have taken that book, I took that book with me to Prague and to Warsaw as a guide as to what I was looking at. So his point is that what you see in the reconstruction is, of course, never the original, but it is a reconstruction according to what the politicians want you to think about the history of a place. So you have certain towns in Germany that have been reconstructed to the 16th century, very chocolatey, boxy, timber framed, and a zillion tourists come every year to look at them and think it's original. And actually, it's not original, it's reconstructed, and it's not even original to the 16th century because it's been reconstructed in an ideal format. So he talks about Vilnius, about Warsaw, about Frankfurt, and some of the horrendous reconstructions that, if you've been to Frankfurt and Cologne, I mean, there's some dreadful reconstructions, together with more of the idealized politics. And one of the longest chapters is on Warsaw because the reconstruction started under the communist rule and then continued into the democratic period. And between the communists and the Democrats, the politics changed. And so the plans for reconstructions changed. So it is this thing, behind this reconstruction, there is a political thought underpinning it.
I've never been to Warsaw, but how's the reconstruction taken place? Does it look medieval, or is it, glass and concrete?
No, absolutely. The old town is, you would never have guessed the Germans flattened it.
Yeah.
It is absolutely astounding. And you just would not know it is a reconstruction. And certainly the Architects Guild, who's in charge of all that reconstruction, scoured the world for original furniture and furnishings that the Americans stole.
I don't believe that.
Whatever. Yeah. So you have chandeliers being recovered from the Blue Mountains of Tennessee, because some American GI picked it up and took it back home. And then they reconstruct, or, there was other furnishings from that original that they had. So it is a fascinating look at the stories, literally the stories that these old towns tell.
That's good. Our final author is Lucinda Hawksley, and she's a biographer, art historian, public speaker, and broadcaster. Her specialities are?
Well, she's also the great, great, great granddaughter of Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
So
that says it all.
It does. But she is in her own right, a great biographer. I've read a number of her books. This particular book, keeping in line with the journey's theme, is the travels of Charles Dickens. Now, Charles Dickens was your original travel writer. He is the founder of modern travel writing. And the book is divided into chapters about the different countries he visited, as well as intertwined into the history of, his life. So he visited the United States twice, which he loathed and loved in parts. He loved France. He was there a number of times. He loved Switzerland. He loved Italy. And it's all his letters home, his letters to friends, and his publications. He writes about during his trip, because he was a great train fan. His train journeys. And what's also interesting in her book is how he incorporates these trips into his different novels. Martin Chuzzlewit,
Tale of Two Cities.
Yeah, that one as well, where,
Mm.
you know, people traveling in trains through time, and these are all as the literally his experience. And Tale of Two Cities in particular, he attended an execution, a beheading in Italy. And he actually went up front and then afterwards to the body to inspect this, which he incorporates into Tale of Two Cities.
Yeah, yeah.
So
She's going to be interesting. I'm sorry I'm missing
yeah.
that one because, you know, we're
She
great
is,
Dickens fans.
well, she was the first one to sell out.
Yeah,
Her tickets
I'm not.
gone.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
And she's a engaging speaker, so she will be very good.
Well, that just about covers it. I mean, thank you very much for sparing me some time. I wish you every success. But if you've sold all the tickets, you've just got to, you know, hope the authors can get here.
Oh God, don't. This is it. Everything's planned. It's just the weather. Fingers crossed.
As ever,
It's the weather.
Yeah, but
But
there we are.
can I make a quick,
You can.
thing on our book clubs? So we have book clubs with J Parris on alchemy, and so that's on Saturday at 11:30 at the Blonde Hedgehog. And then Gail Simmons, that medieval travel, her book club is at the Georgian at 3:30 on the Friday. Then Priscilla Morris on Black Butterflies, The Siege of Sarajevo, book club at the Blonde Hedgehog on Saturday at 11. And Mellisa Fu on Peach Blossom Spring, so the other, the Chinese travels, is at Jack's at 3 o'clock on the Saturday. And you know, you have coffees and teas to accompany this. Even if you haven't read the book, just come along and listen to them. And a final plug to our sponsor, Polygon.
Yes.
Without whom the festival would not be happening.
You got 1 minute 48 seconds.
Left.
But anyway, you know, I know that I know you put an awful lot into it, and I take my hat off to you because without you, I don't think it would be going. But there we are. That's my personal opinion.
We have a fantastic team of volunteers. You know, they make it, you know, you can have all the planning you want, but on the day, it's the volunteers who run the book clubs, who man the Island Hall kitchen, who take your tickets, who sell the books. None of this would happen. Also, would be as successful without them. Typical
Alderney. We couldn't exist without volunteers, could we?
Absolutely.
Isabel, thank you very, very much. Good to see you. All the very best.
Tony. Thank you, Tony. Bye.